Wholesaling made me millions, but yet I still felt broke mentally, emotionally, and yes, at times, financially. I felt stuck. I was feeling burnt out. I felt like I was chasing time for money, which is exactly how I felt in my corporate 9-to-5 job. And if I'm being real, here's the one thing that most people aren't going to tell you about the wholesaling business. It can be one big trap. Let me share with you in this video why I decided to step away from a profitable wholesaling operation and what I ultimately found that just gave me more real freedom. My name is Alex Pardo, and I have been a full-time real estate investor for nearly 20 years and have closed north of 750 to 800 real estate transactions and built a successful, profitable wholesaling operation, and ultimately ended up focusing and transitioning into self-storage. And today, I help real estate investors and employees buy their first storage facility within 6 to 12 months so that they can accomplish and achieve more cash flow, build long-term wealth, and just ultimately have more freedom. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through why I even decided to get into real estate, the hidden mistake behind my wholesaling business and the way that most people build a wholesaling operation and what you need to avoid, the moment I realized something had to change, and then ultimately how I was able to build a bridge and transition into self-storage so that I could generate more cash flow, build more wealth, and again, ultimately just have more options, more time freedom, more financial freedom. And so if you are wholesaling, if you are a fix and flip investor, or if you run any type of transactional residential business, or maybe you're thinking about getting into that business, this video can save you years of burnout, countless dollars, and missed opportunity. So let me just go ahead and share with you, when I first got into real estate in 2005, I did it because I was very ambitious, and ultimately I wanted time freedom. I wanted to build a certain lifestyle. I wanted to travel with my family. I wanted to make sure that I never missed my kids' extracurricular activities, dance, things of that nature. I wanted to impact more people. I wanted to give back. Ultimately, I just wanted options. And the appeal of real estate was that I could build a business and work my schedule, right? I wasn't capped by a certain salary. I didn't have to ask a boss for time off like I did in my corporate job. And the reason I ultimately decided to get into wholesaling was because the barriers to entry are so low. You don't need any capital. You don't need any experience. You don't need to use your credit. And the irony was that while I got into real estate because I wanted freedom, I ended up choosing the wrong vehicle and playing the wrong game. I went all into wholesaling, but here's the crazy part. It actually worked. My first year in business, I closed about 12, 13 deals well into the 6 figures. And I found myself going from deal to deal, chasing transaction to transaction, going after checks and wires for the next 14 years. And I remember I started to climb the wholesaling ladder. And the big mistake I made was that I never took that active earned income and put it into cash flow producing assets. I started building a team because I was tired of being the one that spoke to sellers and did all the marketing and negotiated the deals and did the paperwork and dispositioned the properties. And I was the transaction coordinator. I was wearing all the hats in my wholesaling business. And in 2011, after reading Tim Ferriss's The 4-Hour Work Week, I decided I need to start building a team. I need to start hiring people. So I did that. I hired a virtual assistant, and then ultimately I hired an acquisitions manager, and then a lead manager, and then a dispositions manager, and a transaction coordinator. And for the next 7 years, I started to scale my wholesaling operation. And the big mistake I made early on was that the business was reliant on me. The next biggest mistake was that I got addicted to the income that the wholesaling business was producing. And because I had the right team members in the right seats, and I wasn't necessarily having to be the one wearing all the hats, I found myself being a firefighter, right? I was the arsonist in my business because I constantly felt like I was putting out fires. I was running sales meetings and I was tracking key performance indicators and the metrics of the business. And as I started to scale the business, my overhead started to increase. At one point in 2017-18, my overhead ballooned to about $45,000 a month. And as my overhead and expenses increased, my profit margin started to decrease. Maybe you've started to hire some people and you can relate to what I'm sharing, that as you start to hire and build and add more, your profit margins start to shrink. And what I thought I was doing by building a team and scaling the business was that I thought I was buying back my time. I thought I was in the process of building freedom. But ultimately what I was doing is I was just building a beast that had to be fed month in, month out. And I remember in 2017, I had a pivotal moment. I was traveling with my family. We were on a cruise. And at that time, I think I had 4, maybe 5 team members, and my overhead was somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 at that time a month. And I remember we were doing multiple deals a month pretty consistently. And even though at times the wholesaling business was like a big income roller coaster, maybe you can relate to that. At this particular time, we were doing pretty well, but there were so many things happening with these deals. There's so many variables and moving parts, right? Sellers were having seller's remorse. Sometimes buyers were going behind our back to try to poach the deal. Buyers were wanting to default on their earnest money deposit, not close. I mean, there was so many moving parts. And yet, while I felt like I had built a business on processes and systems, it was constantly evolving. It was constantly changing. And I told my wife, you know, I'm tired of chasing deals. I said, I feel like we were on the Lido deck of this particular cruise. And I remember telling her, like, yes, we've made a lot of money wholesaling real estate, but I'm only as good as my next deal. And every single month I'm starting from scratch. And I remember at that point, I had to close 2 deals a month just to break even, right? And I told her, I said, we need to start taking this active earned income and putting it into cash flow producing assets. And so I started buying single family rentals in Cleveland, Ohio, in a particular neighborhood called Parma and Parma Heights. And I did so because I joined this high-level mastermind. And in this mastermind, it felt like everybody and their mother was scaling the business. And that was the way to freedom. And so I added on more team members, and we got up to about 9-10 team members. I took on more expenses. I ended up getting an office and implementing EOS from Traction, the entrepreneur operating system. And now my overhead had ballooned to about $45,000 a month. And we had to close more deals just to break even. And yet, the more I scaled the business and the more deals I chased, the further I got away from freedom, the further I got away from cash flow. And at this point, we had about 4 or 5 single family rentals in Cleveland. And I thought that owning rentals and building a single family rental portfolio was going to be my path to freedom. The cash flow was ultimately going to give me the option to either keep wholesaling or set aside the wholesaling business so I could pursue something else, but just a bit more passively without the management headaches of having a big team and having big overhead. And what I found was that once again, I chose the wrong vehicle. I thought being a landlord, even though I had a third-party management company in place, was going to free me up, but it just sucked me deeper into that business. And even though we were cash flowing roughly somewhere between $200 and $350 a month, every time I would get a work order, it seemed like that cash flow would diminish. A new furnace has to get replaced. Now a roof has to be replaced over here, or I have to do this and that. And I ultimately ended up having a conversation with a mentor of mine where we looked at a formula that was extremely important. We looked at my return on equity, ROE, and I saw how much equity I had trapped in this rental portfolio relative to the net cash flow that this portfolio was spitting out. And it was less than 4%. In other words, the net cash flow I was receiving on an annual basis was about 3.6, 3.7% of the equity I had trapped if I was to be able to capitalize, sell these properties and take that equity in the form of cash. And so I recognized at the time that there had to be a better way. There had to be another way to generate more cash flow, more passively, without having to have a big team, without having to take on a lot of overhead, and without having to just have all these roofs and all these tax bills, all these insurance bills, all these tenants, the toilets. And I remember at the time I was running a mastermind and I happened to be coaching somebody who owned the storage facility. And I was able to get an inside look into his business. And I saw that all the reasons that I decided to get into real estate back in 2005, time freedom, financial freedom, the appreciation, depreciation, tax benefits, the ability to just build a business based around my vision. He had that. And I got exposed to the storage asset class. But I think what the big mistake most people make is that even though they feel burnt out, because they're making some money, it's their safety zone, it's their comfort zone. And they tend to overthink what it could look like to be involved in an asset class like storage that doesn't deal with tenants and toilets, not really dealing with trash. You're not dealing with extensive maintenance issues. You're not dealing with big projects, generally speaking, and it's less management intensive. Something that can provide you just more consistent cash flow and allow you to be in a vehicle that can really, truly build long-term wealth for you. Not constantly having to build this massive lead generation machine so that you're spending so much money on marketing to generate these leads so that you need to close more deals. And it's just one big hamster wheel. I remember when I was wholesaling, I had the money but yet I felt like I was getting further and further away from freedom, right? I didn't really have mental bandwidth. I didn't have peace because I had built this machine. I had built this business that I constantly had to feed. And maybe you're watching this and you can relate to that. Maybe you're watching this and you can't relate, but you're thinking that's the path you want to go down. And yet all the while I was building something that ultimately wasn't truly sellable. And I remember when I ultimately made the decision to shut down a profitable wholesaling operation at the beginning of 2020. I had actually made the decision in 2019, but at the beginning of 2020 is when I really started to put the wheels in motion. And I remember at the time, I felt like I was dealing with a little bit of an identity crisis because I had been doing this for so long. What I realized, and I wouldn't say quickly, but after having numerous conversations with the right people, journaling, praying, thinking, reflecting, I realized that my identity is not wrapped up in what I do for a living. It's not wrapped up in my identity as an entrepreneur, as a real estate investor, as a wholesaler, as somebody who led and built a team. That does not define who I am. That is just what I do. And after working through that process, when I ultimately made the decision, it felt like a piano had been lifted off my back. I remember publishing a podcast, sharing exactly why I did it, and having numerous well-known individuals in the real estate investing space, thought leaders, gurus, that contacted me and said, I really appreciate you publishing that podcast because I've been feeling the same thing. I just haven't wanted to share that publicly. And sometimes staying in your comfort zone is the very thing that can prevent you from accomplishing what it is that you want, right? There's a quote, and I don't want to butcher it, but there's a quote that says, everything you want is, let me recap, because that is not the quote. I was really going to butcher it, but there's a quote that says, everything you want is on the other side of your comfort zone. But the very magic is in the work you're avoiding, right? The magic you're pursuing, the very thing you want is in the work you're avoiding. I want you to think about that for a second. And I knew for me that if I continued to just stay in my comfort zone, because I knew how to wholesale real estate, I knew how to generate 6 figures a month in profits wholesaling, I knew how to hire, and I had the systems. Even though that was my comfort zone, that was the very thing preventing me from generating more cash flow and ultimately having more freedom. And I had the realization after coaching this individual who had this storage facility that I could have everything I wanted without the traditional headaches of real estate. I didn't have to deal with tenants and toilets and trash, less overhead, higher profit margins, a recession-resistant business that could still give me the tax benefits. I could still tap into depreciation. I could still experience appreciation and real cash flow, right? Not just assignment fees. And what I want to share with you today is I want to open your eyes that there is a better way. And yet I want to tie it back to what I said at the beginning of this video. What I know now after quitting my wholesaling business back in 2020 is that I thought I had to go all in to self-storage. And I'm glad I did because I was able to focus on that. But now having been in this asset class for nearly 5 years, what I realized is that I didn't have to shut down my entire wholesaling operation. A lot of the skill sets that I've acquired and that you've likely acquired if you're a single family investor translate nicely over into storage from a marketing perspective, sales and negotiation perspective, dispositions. And yes, while I did have to learn some of the nuances around how do you evaluate and analyze a storage facility, a lot of the same marketing strategies to find single family homes is the same exact thing I do to find self-storage facilities. And I didn't have to do it incurring a bunch of expenses and monthly overhead. I didn't have to build a big team. In fact, to this day, I don't even have any employees. And yet, up until 6 months ago, I owned 104,000 net rentable square feet of storage across 838 units. I've recently sold 2 of those storage facilities, now own 1 facility, have partnership in another facility, and I have a coaching client in our Storage Wins community. I actually have 2 who are under contract to buy their first facility, and I'll get to partner with them on those. So this is a business where you don't have to wear all the hats and be all things to all parts of the deal. So if you are in the grind and if you are questioning if this is what you really want, I've been there. I can tell you with certainty there is a better way. You can continue to focus on what you're doing now, whether that's being an employee in a 9-to-5 or whether that's in your wholesaling business or in your fix and flip business. And I can show you how you can add storage to your portfolio. Or maybe you're watching this and you're just like me and you said, you know what, Alex, like I want to go all in into storage because I want more cash flow and I want to build long-term wealth. But ultimately what I really want is just options. I want more freedom, financial freedom, time freedom. I can show you how to build that bridge from what you're doing to get get into storage. So if this video has resonated with you, and if you're ready to explore how storage could be the path to freedom for you, I'd love to help. Go to www.storagewins.com/apply to schedule a free strategy call. You don't need any experience. You don't even need to have your own capital, despite what most people think. That's one of the biggest myths I hear when it comes to getting involved in storage. What you do need is a proven system. You need the right model, you need the right mindset, and you need the right coach and mentor. And that's exactly what we'll cover on this call. So go ahead and schedule a free strategy call with me personally, storagewins.com/apply. And I will talk to you then and ultimately just see if it's a fit. But before you go, there's a few common objections that I get when it comes to storage. And I don't want this to be you. I just alluded to one. One of those is, hey, do I need a bunch of money to get into storage? Every single storage deal I've done leveraging other people's money, whether that's seller financing, SBA financing, right? Small Business Administration, traditional bank financing, leveraging private money, right? There's leveraging equity partners and having somebody put the cash in while you're the sweat equity partner. Maybe sometimes people think, hey, is storage overly saturated, right? Is there too much competition? Or I don't know where to start. These are all things that we'll cover on this free strategy call. So listen, you can choose to chase deals the rest of your life and make a really good living. You can make a lot of money. And if that's the path for you, fantastic. I salute you. I tip my hat to you. But I can tell you with certainty that for some, there is going to be a better way. And that's a business like storage that helps you buy back your time. So if ultimately what you're after is freedom and more time options, I can tell you that you can do this if you decide, you commit, and you take that next step. So again, head over to storagewins.com/apply, schedule a free strategy call, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next one. Take care.